Buon pomeriggio a tutti e tutte, benvenuti a questo forum di Terra Madre, i legumi, il futuro del cibo, un tema che trattiamo oggi per celebrare la giornata mondiale dei legumi, quindi il 10 febbraio. Ma abbiamo trattato in realtà il tema dei legumi durante tutta Terra Madre, anche grazie all'iniziativa Lady Bean della rete Slow Beans, che verrà raccontata anche durante questo forum. Non scendo troppo nei dettagli, visto che abbiamo tanti relatori e grandi contributi, e vi do solo ancora qualche nota tecnica prima di iniziare questo forum. Un forum che è in modalità webinar, quindi i vostri microfoni e le vostre videocamere sono correttamente spente. Potrete interagire con i nostri ospiti inserendo le vostre domande nella chat di Zoom, nella lingua che vi è più comoda. Per quanto riguarda la lingua, è attivo il servizio di interpretariato in inglese e in italiano. Per attivarlo dovrete cliccare sull'icona del mappamondo che trovate sulla destra, al fondo, sulla destra del vostro schermo, e cliccare il coreano per selezionare l'italiano, mentre l'inglese basta cliccare inglese. Bene, io direi che possiamo subito iniziare. Lascio la parola al moderatore di oggi, che è Joe Yonan, editor, food and dining editor del Washington Post e anche autore di un libro recentemente pubblicato chiamato Cool Beans. Quindi lascio la parola a Joe e buon forum a tutti.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here to talk to all of you about an ingredient that is near and dear to my heart. I've been researching and writing about beans for several years, eating them for much longer than that, and am just thrilled at the work that Terra Madre and Slow Food are doing in this area, and was thrilled to be involved. We have some really interesting panelists with, I think you'll agree, a very diverse perspectives to talk to you about programs that they're working on and research that they've done, and their thoughts and ideas about how to continue to promote the growing and the eating and the cooking of really what a lot of us consider to be one of the most important foods in the world, honestly. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm going to introduce the panelists as they make their introductions. Each one is going to speak for a few minutes, and then we will have time for maybe a little bit of questions from me, possibly some debate, depending on how things go, and then we'll get a chance to answer audience questions. So first up is Javier Matiz. He's a professor of agriculture at UNISAL in Bogota, and he's the spokesman for the Guajira bean presidium. So I'm going to let Javier start us off.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Joe. For me, it's a great pleasure to be here sharing this conversation about the importance of bean and other legumes for nutrition worldwide, and I especially thank the Slow Food Network for inviting me to share some of what I have learned with the community of the bean Presidium Guajiro. The Presidium Guajiro, located in northern Colombia, I simply come to tell you something about what I have. Excuse me. I have seen and talked with my friend from the Guayu community. Very recently, I have known the Guajiro bean. I have been very interested in the subject because in the first instance, they are a very organized community that has worked hard in the cultivation of this bean, despite the climatic condition and characteristics of the terrain in which they are being a desert region. Our country is a great consumer of different types of beans. The red bean predominates, being widely used and different recipes. Antioquia is a department in Colombia that has a very good reputation for preparing the best bean in the country. In my case, I regularly consume red beans and black beans, but I must confess that until 3 years ago and did not know the Guajiro bean. It seemed incredible to me that anything was grown in the desert, the department of La Guajira. In 2016, Terra Madre, I met Agustin Uriana, and he invited me to get to know his community. A while ago, I visited them and got to know the Guajiro bean recipe. Now, why is the Guajiro bean important to the Guajiro community? The Guajiro community is descended from the Arawak indigenous people, and it is they who have made part of their agri-food heritage from generation to generation. The territory in which the Guajiro communities have settled for decades face environmental problems, among which the continued deterioration of the vegetal layer, erosion, increased solar radiation, and prolonged drought stand out. These environmental events dramatically prolonges drought stand out. These environmental events dramatically affect social and cultural survival for the Guayú only through the development of cultural practice and productive activities such as agriculture, raising, and craft. There is a training process that sensitizes and raises awareness of what they call the Guayú social being, emphasizing the importance of learning and teaching for individual and collective benefit that means the essence of the conception of life and the world. The loss of ethnic identity, values, and principles due to the non-continuity of the teaching learning process that are transferred through cultural practice and productive activities. They generate and accelerate degradation process in the range toward extreme poverty and family disintegration. In 2014, the Department for Social Prosperity, DPS, in alliance with RIMISP, Slow Food, and their human team composed at time by Andrea Amato, Julia Tovar, and Liliana Vargas, faithful to their essence and fight against the disappearance of local food cultures in worldwide. The accelerated progress of their physical, social, and cultural disappearance was slower. Slow Food made them aware and through a process of community reflection of the importance of valuing the ancestral agri-food heritage. The Guajiro bean became a presidium because it's the basic component of the indigenous diet and pillar in the sustainability and durability of the Guayú social organization system, recovering in the families of the Guayú communities the taste for ancestral cuisine. Currently, the Xaximana community and other surrounding communities continue to produce Guajiro beans regardless of the environmental inclemency of the territory, maintain the social and cultural survival of the Guayú ethnic group. Okay, I want to show you a common bean. In this case, is a red ball bean. And here, I show you the Guajiro bean. It's much smaller, but it concentrates a lot of protein. To end, I invite all who see and listen to us to recognize the products originating in their territories and let us not lose the culinary tradition. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. Saludos desde Colombia.
Thank you so much, Javier. Really appreciate that. Yeah, it's so interesting. I wish I could reach into the screen and take that bean from you and cook it up in my kitchen, but I think Zoom has taken us so far, but it has not quite gotten us there yet. Thank you so much. It's so fascinating. Next, we're going to hear from Laura Salinas, who's a member of the Slow Beans Network in Italy and the Belluna Valley Gaialet Bean Presidium. Thank you, Laura.
Buongiorno a tutti, intanto questo è il fagiolo gialleta della Val Belluna, non tutti lo conoscono e pochi a prima vista riconoscono che sia un fagiolo, sembra qualcos'altro con questo bel colore. Rappresento però qualcosa di più, in questo momento rappresento, ecco qua, tanti produttori. Più di una trentina di produttori, siamo quasi 40, diciamo gruppi di produttori di presidio slow food. E anche pochi a prima vista.
Sorry, someone has the YouTube channel on their computer at this moment.
Rappresento però qualcosa di più. In questo momento rappresento. Scusate, ma io sento doppio. Ok.
Laura, tu hai YouTube acceso?
Una trentina di produttori, non credo. Siamo quasi 40, diciamo gruppi di produttori. Accidenti. Di presidio. Aspetta. E anche
Sorry, someone has the YouTube channel on their computer at this moment.
Ok, adesso è silenzioso, qualcuno...
Okay. Laura, tu hai YouTube acceso?
Non credo, no, non lo vedo. Non credo. Guarda.
Hai la pagina di Terra Madre aperta?
No, ho chiuso tutto, non ho niente acceso di Firefox.
May I suggest to maybe go with Becky and see to solve this with Laura maybe? Laura, facciamo il tuo intervento dopo.
Allora riprovo dopo.
Ok, muta il microfono.
Okay, hopefully we can come back to Laura in a moment. So let's move to Becky Ramsing, who's the Senior Program Officer at Johns Hopkins University Center for Livable Future.
There, now you can hear me. Let me share my screen. Oh, can you see, hang on, let me just flip. Sorry.
That's okay.
Can you see the big one or the small one? I'm having trouble with this.
Yeah, we see both.
You see both? Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Here we go. There we go. I'm good.
That's
all right.
it.
Sorry.
That's okay.
A few little things to work out. So anyway, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I work with the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future. And I do have to admit that here in the United States, I am also a lover of beans. I even belong to a bean club, and I get shipments quarterly of sustainably grown beans that I really enjoy cooking. So I'm really happy to be here. As you know, beans and legumes have been around for a long time and are produced and consumed around the world. And nearly every culture has a signature bean dish. And although there are nearly 20,000 varieties, only a handful are developed as crops. But despite this, the importance of beans historically and globally, consumption has not really changed over the last 3 decades. I want to clarify terms I'll be using interchangeably. Legume is the plant that produces the seeds that we call beans. lentils and peas. And then pulses are a subgroup of legumes that are used mainly as a protein in the diet, protein sources in the diet. Common pulses include beans, dry peas, chickpeas, and lentils. Legumes that are used as vegetables like peas or green beans, or for oils like soybeans or groundnuts, are not considered pulses. Pulses are high in protein, fiber, and many vitamins, and they are hardy crops, and they grow easily in a variety of settings. So legumes and pulses vary in their nutrition content depending on the variety, where, and how they are grown. They contain good amounts of important nutrients, some of which are also in animal products like iron, zinc, and some that are unique to plant products only, like folate, fiber, and polyphenols. Total protein is perhaps the easiest nutrient to match to animal products, though there are differences in the protein package. In fact, one cup of cooked beans can provide nearly as much protein as 100 grams of beef. But beyond protein, pulses get a little more complicated. The protein digestibility score is a method of evaluating the quality of a protein. This score is comparable to meat for some legumes, particularly soy and peas. However, huge variations exist. Certain limiting amino acids require that a variety of different plant protein sources are consumed to obtain adequate amounts of essential amino acids. The digestibility of the proteins further down the small intestine is reduced by anti-nutritional factors. Some inhibit the digestion of proteins, and others reduce the bioavailability of the micronutrients such as zinc, iron, and magnesium. Cooking, soaking, and fermenting reduces these impacts and may even confer some beneficial effects. But there's deficiency of other nutrients that may leave crucial gaps, such as vitamin B12 and choline. Non-heme iron is present in legumes, but heme iron in meat is more readily absorbed, thus potentially increasing amounts of legumes and other foods that are needed to meet the requirements. But how legumes are prepared and what they are served with also improves their nutritional quality. Eating a variety and mixed meals with grains and vegetables and more, etc., ensures a better protein profile. Also, adding vitamin C from citrus and vegetables with the meal aids in the non-heme iron absorption. Legumes are associated with many health outcomes, including lower risk of diabetes and cardiovascular disease, healthier weights, and diverse microbiomes. The intrinsic characteristics of legumes are likely responsible, such as slower carbohydrate digestion, higher fiber, lower glycemic index, and higher rates of satiety. However, we can't rule out the influence of just better diets overall for people who eat beans and substitute beans for unhealthy choices. Over the past few years, plant proteins and alternatives to conventional meat have become more popular. However, there's a huge spectrum of products available, and the public health implications of these alternatives are complex. Plant-based alternatives, such as Beyond Burgers, are derived from plant-based ingredients designed to imitate the entire experience of eating certain meats. Most of them use soy, wheat, or pea protein. And then there's cell-based or cultured meat, which is actually meat that is used in a process in which muscle tissue for human consumption is produced using animal stem cells. These are not yet commercially available, but they have several financial, technological, and legal barriers ahead. And then there's whole foods, including natural foods like pulses and beans, and those that can be used in similar ways, but aren't really designed to replicate meat. That might be like tofu or tempeh or seitan. The environmental health implications occur across all stages, from inputs, production, processing, and finally, the retail and consumer stages. So the environmental impact of these products vary greatly. As you can see from this figure, this is from a paper that we recently published, summarizing studies of greenhouse gas emissions from these different food products. The processed products, plant alternatives, though lower than most meats, are still significantly higher than meat. And then, of course, our legumes and peas are much lower. If we had time, we could look at water, land, pollution, soil fertility, pesticide use, and biodiversity. In most cases, pulses have a clear benefit over animal-based foods and processed plant products. Population growth is predicted to accelerate in the coming years, reaching 9.5 billion by 2050. Accompanying this is a demand for protein. Depending on the scenario, the increased demand could be 33 to 78% above the current levels. Though plant proteins make up 60% of the protein supply globally in most countries, the growth of animal protein is outpacing plant proteins. So legumes are an important tool in the toolbox of solutions for food security and nutrition. They are generally easy to grow and can be produced in many different climates, and they do not require refrigeration for storage. So finally, solutions are needed to increase the demand as well as production. A series of reports about global legume production and consumption offer possible solutions across all sectors. Strategic policies include dietary guidelines, such as the Eat Lancet Planetary Health Diet, which recommends pulses for human health and sustainability, financial incentives for producers, supporting innovation, improvement of products from legumes, and education about the nutrition and ecological benefits, and finally, marketing of legumes and their products. So I look forward to working with you toward a more bean-friendly world, and I'm really happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky. Really appreciate that. The health advantages of beans and the sustainability is something that I think is fascinating to all of us. So thank you very much. Do we want to try Laura, going back to Laura again and seeing if we can hear her?
Speriamo. E scusate tutti per
I look forward to working with you toward a more bean-friendly world, and I'm really happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Ok, scusate per l'interruzione e per il disguido. Abbiamo sentito qualcosa di molto interessante dal punto di vista dell'opportunità di mangiare legumi, e io rappresento chi i legumi li produce. Però noi vogliamo essere qualcosa di più che semplici produttori di legumi. Noi siamo nel mondo di slow food e quindi cerchiamo di scusate per l'interruzione e per il disguido. Abbiamo sentito e quindi stiamo cercando interessante dal punto di vista dell'opportunità di mangiare legumi, e io rappresento chi i legumi li produce. Però
non so cosa fare. Allora, non ti preoccupare, riproviamo di nuovo adesso. Ok, Joe, let's try. I will call Laura and see if we can fix this while you can proceed with Camillo.
Okay. So sorry about that, Laura. Yeah, it sounds like there's a delay from previous speakers to me, because I hear my own voice with a long echo there. So I don't know if that helps, but yes, let's hear now from Camilo Mera, who is in Colombia and represents the United Nations Habitat Herbal Rural Linkages Program.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. Thank you for the introduction, and also thank you, Carolina, and the organizing team for inviting me today. I'm very happy to share my thoughts on beans and integrated territorial development, and I also think it's a very good opportunity because as a Colombian, I have a close relationship with beans, like familiar and close relationship with beans. So I'm going to share my presentation. I hope you can see my screen now. Is visible? Okay. So this presentation that I prepared for you is on integrated territorial development, revisiting the role of pulses, as I already mentioned. I'm working with UN Habitat, mostly on urban-rural linkages, integrated territorial development, and approaches. So to start with, I would like to introduce this concept of integrated territorial approaches to development. So from this perspective, just one moment. From this perspective, cities don't exist isolated or in a vacuum. On the contrary, cities have a lot of interactions and linkages with their surrounding regions, territories, and areas deemed as rural spaces, hinterlands, natural spaces. So one way to look at these interactions is to see what flows through urban, peri-urban, and rural spaces. And one of these flows is, for example, food. Other one is water, energy, people, and capital. So the governance and policy implications of this approach is that urban activities and decisions have an impact outside the city boundary. And at the same time, the solutions to the challenges in cities depend on actors, spaces, and resources that are outside the city. So in 2015, UN Habitat initiated the Urban Rural Linkages program. In 2019, this program achieved one of its major milestones with the publication of the Urban Rural Linkages Guiding Principles and Framework for Action. So these are 10 guiding principles that seek to guide a wide range of actors and stakeholders when implementing and formulating integrated territorial development approaches by strengthening the interactions or linkages between urban and rural areas. So in this slide, you can have a closer look to these principles. So it is not only about to manage in an integrated manner urban and rural areas, but to also base decisions and strategies on human rights, on evidence, that these policies and decisions are financially inclusive, environmental sensitive, and that they seek to build balanced partnerships among others. So what is the relevance of pulses related initiatives for integrated territorial development? So to answer this question, I would like to start by highlighting the role of the actors that are engaged in these initiatives. So most of the times, or many times, these are local communities and indigenous people. And I think they are precisely engaged in producing beans because they rely on what is available in their territories, on the resources that they have at hand, on hand. So I think these communities have been producing beans or engaged with pulses since many years. So these production systems have been proved to be sustainable. There is around this productive system, there is a sustainable management of resources that is a source of resilience for these communities, not only in economic terms, but you can also talk about, for example, there is a health dimension, there is a cultural dimension, there is a social dimension around this production. So I think many times the debates and discussions on development or integrated territorial development are focused on the need to re-territorialize systems, for example, food systems, to make it to work at the territorial level. Again, that is to rely on the resources available where they are contained. But I think it's also like very important to focus on these initiatives that already are territorial, and they work at the territorial level and are sustainable modes of production. So when looking at beans and how the pulses in general are produced, you can see also there is a convergence of other sectors and actors at the level of the territories. So when you're producing beans like this, also rely on water. So, but in many territories, other economic sectors also rely on water. For example, mining sector, and thus this can lead to conflicts like a competition over the resources. So we have also to look and resolve these conflicts at the territorial levels to support these initiatives. So I think that pulses-related initiatives have two purposes, like sustainable management of territories, but also to reduce inequalities, as many of these communities and people engaged in the production of pulses and beans are located in rural areas. The relevance of beans as a crop to mitigate climate change, biodiversity, to protect biodiversity, and to achieve the SDGs in general, it can be shown by the overlapping benefits that beans as crops have, like in terms of health, the local varieties that this is related with biodiversity, and also their role in fixing nitrogen and improving the health of soils, and therefore improving the functioning of ecosystems, and also in terms of greenhouse emissions. So I think recognizing and addressing policies is a step towards mainstreaming of biodiversity, not only in these economic sectors, but also in other economic sectors. So this last slide, I want to share some points that also emerge when you look at beans from an integrated territorial perspective. So there are other activities in the value chain that have to be considered. For example, the processing of pulses. The role of urban consumption in stimulating demand is very important. I have learned that, for example, some varieties of beans are in risk of extinction. And this entails not only the extinction of the variety itself, but the knowledge that is attached to the production of this variety. So stimulating demand is key here. And there are some policy instruments in urban areas that can be used, for example, public food procurement, but there are also campaigns that can be useful to engage the private sector or civil society, for example, the Meatless Monday. The role of municipality and local governments is key, as I mentioned. And at the end, I think the challenges is one of the challenges is to find governance mechanism to manage the interactions and sectors that converge around beans. And that means, for example, identify the territories and the actors for policy delivery. And lastly, once again, we should also be careful that these initiatives or like the policies aiming to strengthen this production seek to build balanced partnerships, that they are environmental sensitive, and most important also that they cause no harm to anybody. Or yeah. So this is my presentation. Thank you for your attention. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Camila. That was really interesting. As someone who shops at farmers markets in the city all the time, or I think any of us who are city dwellers and get the chance to experience the products of rural farmers, we understand that relationship, or we should. So thank you very much. Now we're going to see by video a presentation from Shinosuke Minami in Okinawa, Japan. He's the director of the Hantagawa Public Hall and a project that has helped revive Ohigu, an indigenous soybean in Okinawa. So let's take a look at that.
はい、こんにちは。南慎之介と申します。今日はスローフードに関わる、皆さんに、私たちの取り組みを紹介させていただきます。ありがとうございます。私たちは日本の沖縄県那覇市という、場所に住んでいます。もともとあった在来大豆、と豆腐作りの取り組みを紹介させていただきます。日本で言うと、大豆といったら、醤油、味噌、納豆、きな粉や、それから豆腐ですね、に、使われてきました。そして、季節の節目に鬼の目をかぶった人に大豆を巻くという、文化もあります。これは大豆が、悪いものを払い清める力があると、考えられてきました。私の住む沖縄でも、この大豆を使った豆腐作りが、昔から盛んでした。このお豆腐は貴重なタンパク源だったので、それで、たくさん栽培して食べてきましたし、伝統行事にも欠かせないものになっています。日本の中で沖縄、小さな島でございます。130万人が住んでいる島ですが、そこの那覇市に写真にある、半田川公民館、地域のコミュニティセンターになりますが、そこに私は働いています。そこの中で地域のおじいちゃんおばあちゃんからいっぱいお話を聞くイベントをやりました。昔の仕事、食べ物聞いていく中で、今はなくなっているけども、豆腐作りが今よりもずっと盛んだったよっていうことを教えてくれました。 なんでそんなに盛んだったのかというと、水が豊富で美味しかった。それから在来の大豆の存在が分かってきました。この在来の大豆ですね、黄皮宮と言いますが、実はもうほとんど途絶えかけていましたが、農業試験場にわずかに残っているのを10粒分けていただいて、この大豆でもう一度豆腐作りしようという動きが活発になりました。もうこの辺り、那覇市の近くはあまり畑が残されていません。ですが、家の前の小さな畑でこの在来大豆を復活していくのを、地域の皆さんが、主体的に頑張ってくれました。やっていくうちにどうやったら脱穀するのということで、脱穀する棒も、地域の方々が作って復活してきたり、第二次世界大戦以降、70年以上も途絶えていた、湧き水をきれいにするという行事も復活しました。これは、聞き取っていく話から豆腐の存在、それから豆腐作りを支えた水資源のことに地域の方がとても関心が高まったせいです。そうしていくうちに自分たちの資源、それから豆腐作りの文化をこれからの子どもたちに誇りを持って、この地域に生まれてきてよかったなっていうふうにしたいということで、小学校に提案に来ました。今では3つの小学校と1つの中学校の、学校での教材になっています。こうやって一緒に種をまくんですが、ある小学校3年生の子が大豆が今ここにあることがすごいという話をしてくれました。大豆が沖縄にやってきて何百年間もずっと誰かが大豆を巻き続けないと、ここに発芽する大豆があるはずがないということで、命のつながり、それから自分たちの歴史やルーツを考える学習にもなっています。ここにある写真も、学校での授業での脱穀の様子、地域の方々が先生になっていますし、中学生になっても地域を歩いて、歴史のある資源を
Allora, quello che stavo cercando di raccontare è che io rappresento un gruppo di produttori, facciamo parte di una rete chiamata soybeans e siamo tutti piccoli, difendiamo, rappresentiamo una piccola
マーミフェスタとあって、地元の若者がですね、今新しい食を考える皆さん、お店を持っている皆さんとこの在来大豆を生かした交流を進めています。たくさんの方々がこの場所で大豆について、地域文化について学んだり交流することで、私たちの暮らしの豊かさをですね、地域文化を背負いながら実感する時間になっています。はい、短い時間ですが紹介させていただいてありがとうございます。
Thank you so much. I know he can't hear me, but I'd like to thank Shinosuke for that video presentation. I love the idea of beans purifying things. I certainly feel that way sometimes. And I love to give a shout out to the power of front yard gardening as someone who has grown things in my front yard for many years. So thank you very much. I'm not sure whether we're going to back to try Laura now or not. But maybe while I wait to hear about whether we're going to do that, Carolina, do you think we'll try to talk to Laura?
Sorry, I wasn't on the phone with her. She will try to get in again because she's now with she will try with the phone. And okay. So in order not to have that background noise, we don't know why that happened. So she's in, okay. in her way.
Okay. Well, maybe maybe I'll ask a couple questions while we're waiting for her, and then we'll get to some audience questions. You know, one of the things that I feel like I immediately pick up on from a lot of your presentations is, you know, on the one hand, the need to maybe promote beans and other legumes as a strategy for feeding a growing population, which would seem to call for large-scale strategies. And there are some strategies that are certainly using a lot of beans in processed foods, as Becky mentioned. But then on the other hand, there's all this energy regarding very small scale agriculture, local farms, very traditional varieties of beans that maybe had been almost forgotten. So I'm curious what some of you think about those two approaches, and whether the answer is to go forward with both of them, or whether there's just how they relate. They seem to be almost in conflict sometimes, and so I'm curious what you think about that. Maybe Javier, you might have a thought about that.
Hola, Joe. ¿Cómo estás?
Hi.
Dime, Carolina, ¿me puedes traducir, por favor?
Oh, translations. Yes.
Yeah.
See.
Can you synthesize the question, Joe? Sorry.
Sure. I'm curious about the two different strategies of promoting bean consumption. One very large scale industrial, and the other very small scale traditional agriculture. And yeah, if there's a conflict between those, what people think about that.
Pues Javier, Joe is asking about, Joe pide las diferencias entre dos modalidades de promoción de las legumbres, una más de grande escala, un poco como un poco más industrial, y la otra más de pequeña escala. Las dos sirven para promover las legumbres, para hacer que la gente le come más, pero bueno, son dos metodologías diferentes. Entonces,
Okay.
¿qué opinas tú? Si quieres contestar en castellano, en español,
Sí.
pero despacito,
No.
así yo le
Ok.
voy traduciendo paso a paso en inglés.
Perfecto. En primera instancia, lo más importante es el compromiso que debe tener el consumidor. Esto es definitivo porque en Colombia, y yo creo que en muchos lugares del mundo, no sabemos el origen de nuestros alimentos, incluyendo los frijoles. Translate, please.
So the first thing is to understand the situation of the consumer, where the consumer starts from, which is his knowledge. Because, for example, in Colombia, people do not really know where the beans they eat come from. Javier?
Un ejemplo de esto es que en Colombia, de manera industrializada, estamos consumiendo frijoles que no son de Colombia. Estamos importando alimentos de Centroamérica, Ecuador y Perú. Y nosotros creemos que son frijoles colombianos.
For example, what is happening in Colombia is that we import a lot of beans, even though we produce them. But we import a lot of beans, not from overseas, but also from our neighbor countries, such as Ecuador, Peru. But people think that are locally sourced, while they're not.
Una estrategia para los pequeños productores es la asociación entre pequeños productores y no esperar un apoyo del gobierno porque muchas veces nos quedamos esperando ese apoyo y no se hace nada. Considero que debe ser una iniciativa privada de promoción local para el consumo de frijoles, en este caso locales.
So what can actually be a strategy is for small-scale farmers to associate among themselves, between themselves, rather than wait for governmental aid, as if they can wait forever. So to promote locally sourced beans, it's better to associate between them.
Yeah, combine forces.
Y en el tema industrial, pues desafortunadamente, las grandes empresas solamente piensan en rentabilidad, pero debe existir un compromiso social de estas empresas para comercializar productos solamente colombianos. Es luchar por la soberanía alimentaria en nuestro país y entender que apoyamos al campesino solamente consumiendo los productos locales.
Gracias, Javier. In conclusion, the big industry way, it's not going to solve the problem or help in building the food sovereignty and strengthen food sovereignty in Colombia. We have to look from the other direction. Otherwise, the logic of capitalism, I would say, it's going to prevail all the time.
Great, thank you. Do Becky or Camilo, do you have anything that you would like to add to that before we try to devote a few minutes at least to some audience questions?
I mean, I could add something really quick.
Sure.
I think when you think about, legumes and beans, and this is more from a nutritional perspective, it's, we want to eat more, but we don't have to go exclusive. There's a balance that we can have. And the nice thing about legumes, from my understanding, is that you can intercrop them very well. And there's a lot of different methods of growing them. And so I think the exciting things about beans is how they can really help farmers, but also help larger farms as well. So I think, nutritionally, just to be very careful, like there's a great opportunity with legumes to expand our diet and to also help the smallholder farmers, as well as, overall nutrition that we need for a better society.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to share 2 points also. I think regarding this is a tension that exists in around most of productive of foods, let's say. But I think there are different ways to support these two actors, let's say the industrial production or the more scale production. I think regarding the industrial production should be supported in ways, for example, to mainstream biodiversity concerns in the way they produce, and also climate change concerns in the way they are producing. And also, I think I mentioned that in my presentation, industrial production also compete for resources, in their territories where they produce with more scale farmers that can produce other products. That's one point. And regarding, for example, the more scale production, I think definitely they need other kind of support. For example, if they want to do so, to expand their business to reach more consumers, but also at the same way to preserving or keeping the way that they produce, and this can be also economically sustainable for them and for their communities.
Great, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So we are getting some questions from audience members, so I'll throw one out to you. This is definitely an agriculture question. What are the more common products that are combined when growing pulses to promote soil regeneration? It's a two-part question. So that's part one. And the second part is, if the demand of pulse beans increases, how can we ensure that there are polyculture farms instead of monoculture, legume-oriented farms. Maybe Laura, hopefully your audio is back. This seems like potentially a good question for you as a bean producer.
Certamente, e anzi ringrazio e mi scuso. La domanda mi dà proprio l'occasione per raccontare quello che siamo noi. Siamo dei coltivatori di slow food e in questo senso noi non coltiviamo soltanto un fagiolo, noi cerchiamo di coltivare delle culture. Culture nel senso che i nostri legumi sono fortemente legati a dei territori anche piccoli. Continuiamo coltivazioni su piccolissima scala, per lo più familiari, facciamo tanta vendita diretta e siamo tanto presenti, ci mettiamo la faccia. Cerchiamo di utilizzare sapere un po' a tutto tondo. In questo senso ci sentiamo proprio degli attivisti sul lato pratico della filosofia di slow food, cioè noi raccontiamo delle cose giuste, certo, ma vogliamo soprattutto trasferire un piacere che è un bene per la collettività, è un bene per il futuro dell'umanità, ma è anche e soprattutto un piacere nostro. Questa noi crediamo sia una grossa molla. In concreto come? Ad esempio, cercando di, oltre che di raccontare, di far vedere che noi siamo capaci anche di cucinare. E una delle iniziative belle e originali sono le fagioliadi, una gara semiseria, gioiosa tra noi produttori nell'ambito di una mostra mercato in cui noi produciamo dei piatti originali che sottoponiamo al giudizio del pubblico, che lo fa seriamente con una scheda con ben 4 parametri da valutare: la delicatezza, l'originalità, il carattere. E questo ci permette anche di far venire voglia di mangiare dei legumi che tanta gente al giorno d'oggi in Italia, dove era una grande tradizione, non sa più come mangiare. Più persone mi hanno chiesto: ma bisogna cuocerlo? È così bello, credevo si potesse mettere in bocca. Usiamo anche il linguaggio dell'arte, una cosa che piace molto, sono installazioni che facciamo con le nostre facce, le chiamiamo facce da fagiolo, e queste installazioni in giro per i paesi, ma anche con delle mostre, uniscono da un lato un'espressione artistica con la nostra faccia, non so, il nostro fagiolo in testa, ma piacciono, incuriosiscono, ci permettono di entrare e di farci vedere anche in luoghi poco abituali per vendere fagioli, per vendere legumi. Ad esempio siamo stati al castello di Padernello, siamo stati in posti bellissimi, posti meravigliosi della nostra tradizione. Ecco, il nostro modo di porci è quello proprio un po' alternativo all'agroindustria della soia. Noi non vogliamo che la gente usi proteine semplicemente come mattoncini del proprio nutrimento, noi vogliamo nutrire anche l'anima. In questo l'altra iniziativa importante che stiamo portando avanti è Let It Bean, una serie di incontri fatti col supporto e la collaborazione del movimento Meatless Monday, in cui i nostri legumi vengono presentati dai coltivatori, dagli chef del territorio che li propongono, li raccontano, e dalle istituzioni, da qualche altro esperto magari di storia, e dalle istituzioni locali. Questo è un punto importantissimo, proprio perché l'impegno dei sindaci che diventano ambasciatori di slow beans testimonia il riconoscimento delle esternalità, delle cose aggiuntive che la nostra coltivazione, che appunto non è soltanto un pezzettino, un qualche cosa che mettiamo nel piatto, non sono solo proteine, ma ha una valenza culturale, sociale, identitaria.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Laura. I didn't think that I needed another reason to move to Italy, but the idea of competing in the Bean Olympics is definitely now at the top of my list of reasons to move to Italy, because I want the medal. I want a medal that says that I won the Bean Olympics. This has been such a fascinating conversation. There's so much information that I know we tried to get at. It's a huge topic, and we have great, wonderful panelists. And I'm afraid that we are running out of time for any more questions. But I hope that our participants enjoyed it. I certainly did. I really was happy to participate in it. And yes, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your interest in beans. And if you don't have plans for dinner, I hope you all know what you're going to be making and eating. Some sort of bean dish, please. Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you, Joe, for your great moderation and for being very patient with some technical problems. But I know that in these days they are very common, and we are getting used to them. I also thank you all the participants that joined us today. If you have a few minutes, you can. I kindly ask you to fill in the questionnaire that you will find in the chat. It is important for us to understand also how our forum are going. And thank you very much. Please, if you want to know more also about slow beans and how to develop a slow bean network in your territory, you can write to us at slowbeans@slowfood.it. Thank you very much, and thank you, Joe.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
The future of our planet is decided at the table in our daily food choices. What do we know about what we eat? How do we choose? Where do we buy it? You can make a difference and contribute to a future where everyone has access to food that is good. Eating must be a pleasure for everyone. We all have a right to food that is natural, fresh, and seasonal. Clean. Being aware helps us to choose food that is good for our health and the health of our planet. Fair. Knowing our food means making choices that are fair to us, to the producers, and to future generations. Slow Food has been working for over 30 years to defend biodiversity and fight the climate crisis by promoting good, clean, and fair food for all. Support Slow Food. Let's act together for the common good. Go to donate.slowfood.com/en.